Yeah. We want to welcome you to what is it, the fourth in our sessions on Exodus. We're picking up with the deliverance out of Egypt itself, and we are looking at Exodus 12, 13. Let me write that down. Exodus 33 through 15, 27. So I'll put that in the chat. And we have been through the plagues, and we are now at the point where the Israelites are getting ready to cross the Red Sea. So we're going to begin by first reading at 12:33 through 13:16. That's going to be the first section. And I'll go ahead and read the first time, but I'll be looking for anybody to volunteer to read the section on the pillars of cloud and fire in just a few minutes. Not a very long section, so volunteers, get your volunteer hands ready. All right. So we've been through the 10th plague, and now we're at 12:33 and the Exodus. That's where it actually says the Exodus in a lot of our Bibles, doesn't it? The Egyptians urged the people to hasten their departure from the land, for they said, "We shall all be dead." So the people took their dough before it was leavened and their kneading bowls wrapped up in their cloaks on their shoulders. The Israelites had done as Moses told them. They had asked the Egyptians for jewelry of silver and gold and for clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have what they asked. And so they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. A mixed crowd also went up with them, and livestock in great numbers, both flocks and herds. They baked unleavened cakes of the dough that they had brought out of Egypt. It was not leavened because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. The time that the Israelites had lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, on the very day, the companies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. That was for the Lord a night of vigil, to bring them out of the land of Egypt. The same night is a vigil to be kept for the Lord by all the Israelites throughout their generations. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the ordinance for the Passover. No foreigner shall eat it, but any slave who has purchased may eat of it after he has been circumcised. No bound or hired servant may eat of it. It shall be eaten in one house. You shall not take any of the animal outside of the house, and you shall not break any of its bones. The whole congregation of Israel shall celebrate it. If an alien who resides with you wants to celebrate the Passover to the Lord, all his males shall be circumcised. Then he may draw near to celebrate it. He shall be regarded as a native of the land, but no uncircumcised person shall eat of it. There shall be one law for the native and for the alien who reside among you." All the Israelites did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. That very day, the Lord brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, company by company. And there's the very special words, right? That very day, the Lord brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt. So we carry on. So far now, we've seen that the Egyptian people urged the Israelites from the land. The Israelites asked the Egyptians for jewelry of silver and gold and clothing, and they were given these many things. 600,000 men plus their families and their livestock, and they were enslaved for 430 years, according to the writer. So then we get a little more directions for the Passover and the firstborn. So let's start at chapter 13. The Lord said to Moses, "Consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever is the first to open the womb among the Israelites of human beings and animals is mine." Some of you might remember that from that was the instruction to that was referred to in the story of Simeon and Anna. back in our Advent study. Moses said to the people, "Remember this day on which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, because the Lord brought you out of there by the strength of hand. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Today, in the month of Abib, you are going out. When the Lord brings you to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your ancestors to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you shall keep this observance in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a festival to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. No leavened bread shall be seen in your possession, and no leaven shall be seen among you in all your territory. You shall tell your child on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. It shall serve for you as a sign on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead." Remember those? The sign on the hand and the reminder on the forehead, the phylacteries and things like that, so that the teaching of the Lord may be on your lips, for with a strong hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt. You shall keep this ordinance at its proper time from year to year. So we're still getting instruction about the leavened bread and the consecration and the reminder on the forehead and on your hand. When the Lord had brought you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your ancestors, and has given it to you, you shall set apart to the Lord all that first opens the womb. So here we are again with the firstborns. All the firstborn of your livestock that are males shall be Lord's. But every firstborn donkey you shall redeem with a sheep. If you do not redeem it, you must break its neck. Every firstborn male among your children you shall redeem. When in the future your child asks you, "What does this mean?" you shall answer, "By the strength of the Lord, hand of the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from human firstborn to the firstborn of animals. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord every male that first opens the womb, but every firstborn of my sons I redeem. It shall serve as a sign on your hand and as an emblem on your forehead." There we are again. "By strength of the hand of the Lord brought on your forehead, that by the strength of hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt." Okay. What we've seen so far is an accent on this in this text on that of liberation. The miracle of transferring the public power from Egypt to God. And God is forming the new people. And these are the very first instructions. This is before the 10 Commandments. This is before all the rest of the laws. These are the core instructions on how to get through Egypt. And there's an emphasis on consecration, an emphasis on putting the Lord first. You see that? And there's an emphasis on teaching the children. It said what you will say when your children ask you, and it says exactly what to say, doesn't it? So all of this is a liberation, transferring power from Egypt's way to God's way. And this is before the manna too. So they're just now beginning to get a sense of how this is going to be. In the biblical community of faith here, this is a community of memory. And that's something that's important I want to emphasize. We live in a culture of amnesia. A lot of the consumerism that we have tempts us to abandon the past in order to live in the now. Don't the commercials that you see tell you that you need this now and your life will be complete if you have this now? This text, however, tells us to remember. The community says, "This do in remembrance." It's not just a history lesson, but this is rather an act of resistance against amnesia. What are some acts of resistance against amnesia that we practice as Christians? What are some things we do to reinforce memory and reinforce our story.
Using the same prayers over and over again.
Sure. Same prayers and liturgies. Diane?
Do this in remembrance of me.
That's right. That's right.
And our baptism.
Mm-hmm.
Communion.
Communion is steeped in not just remembrance as a historical event, but as a renewal, a remembering, a putting back together. Yes, Linda.
Our whole liturgical year is based on memory, Advent, Lent, Easter, Pentecost, all of those things are based on memory.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Well said. Good answers. And studying scripture itself is memory, isn't it? Good, good. And the more we do this, and the more we do this, then the more we are casting off the ways of Egypt and adopting the ways that God taught the Israelites. So when you do remember, think about it. And when you do go through those practices, think about how Egypt is not just consumerism. Egypt was power and military might and some other things, but that you are casting off Egypt in favor of God's ways.
Can I plunder my neighbor as an act of remembrance?
It's in there. It's in it. It's there is a plundering.
But before the plundering, they were told. God told them to talk with their neighbors and friends.
And by the time the people had been through all that they had been through and lost so much in the plagues, then they seemed almost more than happy to get rid of the Israelites.
But can it be plundering when you ask?
Yeah.
You didn't go in. They didn't go into their homes and steal.
They asked, and it was.
They asked, and they was given.
Well, were they asking for it to be given, or were they asking to borrow it so they could use it in their worship?
Don't know.
The message says that they picked the Egyptians clean. They did ask.
That doesn't sound like an
borrowing or asking.
Was that repayment for 400 years of slavery?
Ah, one might should ask. That's right.
If we do, then should we also ask about the notions about repayment to parts of our population for slavery in our own country?
Yeah. One thinks. One has to think.
I never let us go through a story and miss the hard parts. That's just not who I am.
That's fine. These are questions that have a lot of food for thought. Very good. Absolutely. Issues of justice and memory, and it's easier to forget than it is to set about justice. It's easier to try to forget. So this text calls us to be a people of remembrance, and people of remembrance hopefully don't make some of the same mistakes. Hopefully, but that's part of the idea. Well, good.
As Fran always says, those who forget the past tend to repeat it.
Yeah. Tend to, or sometimes doomed to repeat it. Well, good discussion on this issue of memory and Egypt versus the new way. Okay, the pillars of cloud and fire. Would I have anybody volunteer to read chapter 13, verses 17 through 22. Okay, John, you raised your hand. Thanks, John.
When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they may change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road towards the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt ready for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the Israelites swear an oath. And he said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up with you from this place. After leaving Succoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left this place in front of the people.
Thank you. So this departure from Egypt is not the end, but only the beginning of a long struggle for freedom and identity and destiny among God's people. Getting out of Egypt was just the beginning. Now God is leading them on a new way, apart from the life-robbing, life-denying ways of Egypt. Now they're going to have to follow not their own ways, but the demanding lead of Yahweh, which can lead them into places of danger. And they have to remember that Yahweh is with them. And they have to be continually refreshed and resolved. And you'll see that throughout Exodus, how they have to be continually reminded by God that God is going to lead them to trust God and not their own devices. And they are going to express their addiction to the order and the oppression and the regular food supply of the empire. And they're going to feel like that they were better off in Egypt sometimes, because there at least they knew where their food was coming from. But Yahweh's leadership is aimed against that death-dealing addiction. Have you ever had a time, I want you just to think about it, and if you want to answer, that's fine, or if you just want to think about it, it's up to you. But we welcome either way. What is it like for us when we let go of what we are holding on to and follow God into an unknown place? What is it like for us when we let go of what we were holding on to and follow God into an unknown way or place in our lives?
Scary.
It's hard to let go of control.
Things change.
Things change. Yeah. Doubt? In what way?
Is this God's way or my way?
Yeah. Yeah.
In releasing anger, I felt relief.
You said I. So it sounds like they used an I statement there, Fran.
Yeah.
Anger. You release anger and you feel relief.
Well, I did in this particular instance.
In this instance, your eye problems and
No. I like in capital Me. That doesn't sound right either.
I see.
when you're facing really hard situation and there are things that people don't understand and that you are not able to share with them for legal reasons and other reasons, sometimes you feel very alone. But you know that you have a path that you have committed to follow, and it is scary, but you also know that you can't do it on your own strength, and you have to pray a lot.
Pray a lot. Yes, Linda.
One of the things that we found in what was a really big move for us, not just physically, but also, you know, emotionally, and into a new culture, I will say, was that we needed other people to help us to navigate these systems. And so, you know, having other people to help us, to be around us, was wonderful. So.
That's a good way to look at it too. Good reflections, friends. Any others? Thank you. Good reflections. Okay, then we cross the Red Sea. This is going to be verse 1 through 25.
Chapter 14.
Chapter 14, yeah. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and camp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal-zephon, and you shall camp opposite it by the sea. Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, they are wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has closed in on them. I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, so that I will gain glory for myself over Pharaoh and all his army. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." And they did so. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the minds of Pharaoh and his officials were changed toward the people. And they said, "What have we done, letting Israel leave our service?" So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 picked chariots and all other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites, who were going out boldly. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, the chariot drivers and his army. They overtook them camped by the sea, by Pi-hahiroth, in front of Baal-zephon. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back, and there were the Egyptians advancing on them. In great fear, the Israelites cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this the very thing we told you in Egypt? Let us alone and let us serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." But Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and see the deliverance that the Lord will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you will have only to keep still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward. But you lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the Israelites may go into the sea on dry ground. Then I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And so I will gain glory for myself over Pharaoh and all his army, his chariots and his chariot drivers. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I have gained glory for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots and his chariot drivers." The angel of God who was going before the Israelite army moved and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud moved in front of them and took its place behind them. And took its place behind them. It came between the army of Egypt and the army of Israel. And so the cloud was there with the darkness, and it lit up the night. One did not come near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into a dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites went into the sea on dry ground. The waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went into the sea after them, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and chariot drivers. At the morning watch, the Lord of the pillar of fire and cloud looked down upon the Egyptian army and threw the Egyptian army into panic. He clogged their chariot wheels so they turned with difficulty. The Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the Israelites, for the Lord is fighting them against Egypt, fighting for them against Egypt." So let's see. Yeah. I'm going to keep reading to the end of the chapter. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariot and chariot drivers." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at dawn the sea returned to its normal depth. As the Egyptians fled before it, the Lord tossed the Egyptians into the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the chariot drivers, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the Israelites walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great work that the Lord did against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord and believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So the purpose of this narrative, one of the purposes is for God to get glory over Egypt, so that Egypt will know and acknowledge that Yahweh wants allegiance. So the larger purpose of the narrative is not to comfort the Israelites, but to look beyond Israel to the doubting, cynical world, so that all the world will see the rest of the world, that starting with the Egyptians, is meant to be the audience. God wants this to be a story about how God wins. Thoughts?
This story is riddled with problems that we read through and we overlook. And one of them I just picked up in the reading today because I was listening rather than reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Previous reading, we have that God doesn't want the Israelites to face the battle with Philistines, so he's going to move them around that. And yet a few verses later, we have God telling them to get ready. I'm going to get ready for battle with the Egyptians, which was supposedly at that time a much stronger military force. You want to say, well, now if God can help them beat the Egyptians, why wasn't God willing to help them take the Philistines? Then we also have them escaping Egypt, heading east. But we're going to get an east wind. In other words, the wind that's going to open up the sea is blowing in their face.
Mm-hmm.
Which every map I've ever seen shows them going across the Red Sea from west to east. And many of them now say, it's further north than really what was the Reed Sea, but it still is an east wind blows water in, not out.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I've always heard, it was blowing out. And I don't know, I was listening today rather than reading, and
Mm-hmm.
always before I'm reading, and I'm sitting there now, wait a minute, these parts of the story just aren't fitting together like we've always thought they would. And so I don't know. It's interesting listening rather than reading.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't picked up those two things before. There's some pretty significant problems in the way the story gets told. I got to wrestle with that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to study up on that some. I don't know much about the meteorological side of things, but I know about, or I think I don't say no. I have a theory about the, leading them away from some of the from the Philistines. Is I feel like God wants to really have it in and have a battle with the Egyptians first and foremost. I think God just wants to settle the score and consistent with the previous narrative. But I don't know. That's a good question. Any other thoughts or ideas?
The dividing of the sea, they walked through it with walls of water on either side of them.
Mm-hmm.
Could the wind have been so focused that it just cut a path?
Mm-hmm.
And they had to walk in the wind to get across, but the wind was dividing the water.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. And how much wind did it take? Was it wind?
Oh yeah, that would take. I mean, I've grown up around water and wind all my life. That would take more wind than I've ever seen. It would take more than I could walk against. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah, or a supernatural hand, with wind as part of the experience. Fran, what are your thoughts?
So, if you look at the map, why do they have to go south in order to go north?
I'm not sure on the geography. Anybody else know?
Well, I mean, that's where they try to, they say they're going to go south to get around the Philistines.
Yeah.
Because the Philistines had that territory between Egypt and Israel. Pretty narrow little area. Of course, when they go around, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of like how we used to have to go to Moorhead when the bridge got stuck. Pretty long way around. We tell these stories and we tell them and make them so matter of fact that we don't even realize that the story we tell isn't the story that's written. And I think that's a big part of what I've noticed with the Bible and my years of studying it is the story that I always have been told in lots of places is not the biblical story that's written. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I've often found that, kind of like we're told, oh yeah, the baby Jesus was born and there were shepherds and there were wise men and there were sheep and, and a moo cow in the corner and a little drummer boy. And I mean, these are the stories we get told. None of that even resembles the story that's actually written.
Yeah. One of the questions I was asked, or at least on a trivia, there's some one time was, who cut Samson's hair? Anybody know? I see some of you saying Delilah, right? Delilah. Well, then the trivia was a trick question because it says Delilah sent a Philistine to cut Samson's hair. So, we do have these things where we have to do a close read sometimes. And that's why I appreciate these close reads.
But don't we do the same thing with our family lore?
Oh.
If I were to tell you the story of my family, would it be identical to my sister's story or my niece's story or my grandmother's story?
Well, I know in local church histories, there are especially churches that have been around a long time. there are histories written by the people who live in the church, and they tell the stories, and historians sometimes say, well, we have to consider the source, because the people who are in the local church are going to say that that everything was always amazing all the time, and they don't write about when there were arguments. Well, then maybe they don't, they don't put in too many of the things about the person who was hard to get along with in the church or anything like that. Doesn't really make it in the church histories. They call that hagiography, right? Where you write the story as the way you'd like it to be remembered, and leaving out some of the more difficult parts.
In the Pentateuch written that way a lot?
Isn't the what?
The Pentateuch.
The first five books of the Bible. I hear some scholars say that, and I think some of you are finding that to be true. We've discussed that this is written.
Know that Moses wrote it word for word, the first 5 books of the Bible.
And he wrote his death.
And he wrote about his death.
Yeah, even though he died at the end of 2, by some miraculous feat of God, he wrote the next 3 chapters. It's and I argue this with me.
You guys, I hear you. We have to always have an open ear and ask questions, hard questions of the text. So our last bit now is the Song of Moses and the Song of Miriam. The Song of Moses is a lot longer, and then we're going to finish chapter 15 with the bitter water made sweet.
I don't know about you, Taylor. I was taught back in seminary, which was closer to when this happened than when you went. But I was taught that the Song of Miriam was actually considerably predated the Song of Moses.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
I don't know if that's still the general feeling of scholars.
Yeah.
But somewhere I remember my Old Testament professor making a big deal about that, and I don't remember why he made a big deal about it.
Yeah, might be a good example of what we were talking about earlier about writing things back into the story. Yeah. So the Song of Moses, and so then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my might, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior, the Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he cast into the sea. His picked officers were sunk in the Red Sea. The floods covered them, they went down into the depths like a stone. Like your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power, your right hand, O Lord, shattered the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrew your adversaries. You sent out your fury. It consumed them like stubble. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The floods stood up in a heap. The deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. But you blew with your wind, and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. In your steadfast love, you led the people whom you redeemed. You guided them by your strength to your holy abode. The peoples heard, they trembled. Pangs seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were dismayed. The trembling seized the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan melted away. Terror and dread fell upon them by the might of your arm. They became still as a stone until your people, O Lord, passed by. until the people whom you acquired passed by. You brought them in and planted them on the mountain of your own possession, the place, O Lord, that you made your abode, the sanctuary, O Lord, that your hands have established. The Lord will reign forever and ever. So, what, to your point, Jim, there's a lot of prefiguring in this song about the conquerings that are going to happen later. So, that could be part of the writing back in. When the horses of Pharaoh with his chariots and his chariot drivers went into the sea, the Lord brought back the waters of the sea upon them, but the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. And then Miriam has a song. Then the prophet Miriam, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with tambourines and with dancing. And Miriam sang to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea." Would anybody then, let's see. Well, let me ask you this. If you were Miriam or Moses, what would you include in your song?
If I were Miriam, I would probably make a bigger deal about my brother being Moses than my brother being Aaron. I'd want you to know that I was sister to the big cheese. But isn't it interesting? That's not where she goes. So does that mean that maybe that she was a half sister of Moses, maybe? Those are the types of things when I read, I go, okay, what's between the lines here? What's by what is being said, what is not being said.
Yeah.
And I don't know about the rest of y'all, but to me, if I were Miriam, I would have said, "Hey, the sister of Moses." I'm not sure I would have said the sister of Aaron, unless I didn't like Moses. I
don't know. That's an interesting theory.
Yes, I'm in an inquisitive mood today.
All right.
I apologize to the rest of the group that I am in an inquisitive mood.
In response to that, Jim, in Exodus 2, Miriam is identified as his sister.
Yeah.
And I don't think she wrote that. I think somebody wrote it for her.
Yeah. It might have
She
been.
can't be an equal to Moses, but she can be an equal to Aaron.
I love the image of her and all the I love the image of her and all the women taking up their tambourines and that kind of thing too. Would anybody read for us the verses 22 through 27 to close our reading for today?
I'll do that, Taylor.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Moses led Israel from the Red Sea onto the wilderness of Shur. They traveled for 3 days through the wilderness without finding any water. They got to Marah, but they couldn't drink the water at Marah. It was bitter. That's why they called the place Marah, bitter. And the people complained to Moses, "So what are we supposed to drink?" So Moses cried out in prayer to God. God pointed him to a stick of wood. Moses threw it into the water, and the water turned sweet. That's the place where God set up rules and procedures. That's where he started testing them. God said, if you listen obediently to how God tells you how to live in his presence, obeying his commandments and keeping all of his laws, then I won't strike you with all the diseases that I inflicted on the Egyptians. I am God, your healer. They came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. They set up camp there by the water.
Thank you. Now, this is a concrete example of their new utter dependence on God. Water is required for life, and is urgent in the wilderness. And water cannot be invented or devised or manufactured. They had to have the water. So it can only be given and received. And this was the new way God was teaching them to be dependent on God, to receive rather than to simply expect. So we have now two tales of water that both assert Israel's vulnerability and Israel's utter dependence, and also Yahweh's fidelity in giving what is needed for life. Water used, to free the people, and then water used to give life. Yeah, Linda, what do you think about that?
Well, as this was being read, I couldn't help but think about Psalm 23, where, the Lord, leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. So it just seemed like that maybe that's what David was singing about too. I don't know. There's certainly, I think, as water is definitely important, and being beside still water where you can drink and relax and find refreshment. And I love those palm trees. That's really good.
There's got to be some significance to the fact that there was water there, but you couldn't drink it.
I think it was
not all water sustains life.
Yeah, I think it was meant as an object lesson for the Israelites to see that, okay, you've got this water, but you can't drink it. You have to get me to make it safe, purified for you. Yeah.
Taylor?
Yeah, Lee?
My first reaction, and it's probably the wrong one, I told John yesterday that I'm very superficial. I don't think through things. I just react to them. But it sounded like to me 3 days out and no water available, 3 days back and maybe that's 6 days in the desert. It's more like the carrot and the stick. You pay attention to me or you're gone. Yeah. And it was more of it didn't sound very loving, quite honestly. It says, okay, I got you here now. You better pay attention.
Tough love, if anything.
I'm right now, I'm not if I was an Israelite, I would not be, I'd be more afraid than loving. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was just a reaction.
Just the honest reaction. Yeah. I hear that. Yeah.
I just want to know what's in that stick, because I think I could make some money on it.
Yeah, that's impressive, isn't it? There is no free offer of healing. One cannot be healed if one insists on continuing the practices that produced the problem. So there's a relearning here. In this case, the healing of the diseases of Egypt requires the coming under the command of Yahweh and renouncing the commands of Egypt. So there's a anti-Egypt now, Israelite way now, a way that is going to be formed again and again when they have to they're going to go to another place for water. They're going to go to a rock for water later on. And
there's also the ongoing biblical image of living water, meaning running water. This doesn't go with Linda's idea of the still waters, but generally speaking, if you're out in the wilderness, you don't want to just drink from a pool of stagnant water. You want running water, or as we get picked up on in, multiple times in the Bible, living water. And we're going to go from, they find this water that's just sitting there, no real description of it.
Yeah.
But now we're going to go from there to finding a place of springs where water does run.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything to be, we should necessarily lose track. What did it say? 7 springs? Or how many springs did it say?
12.
12 springs.
And 70 palm trees.
Yeah, that's where the 7 was. So here we have those good old-fashioned biblical numbers of good fortune.
Yeah.
Of 12s and 7s.
Yeah.
Which mean more than how many springs there were. It's really just talking about an abundance, plenty, plenty of water.
Yeah.
You're out in the wilderness and you find plenty of water. Not only is enough water for you, shucks, it's enough to grow coconuts.
Yeah.
And well, probably bananas there.
Water all your livestock and everything.
Yeah. It's I think there's some there's some other hidden cultural religious notes in the story.
Yeah.
With these numbers. Of course, I'm one of these that, I love biblical numerology. The Bible numbers are never the numbers. They always are symbolic of something else. And I'll have people say, well, now if it says it's 12, it must be 12. And I want to say, yeah. And if I said, and I, as I used to say to my kids, and I told you 100 times not to do that, did I really mean that I told them 100 times, or I just told them more than I wanted to?
Yeah.
And that's the way, we have heirs, and they did the same thing.
They use a lot of symbolic numbers. Yeah.
Except when they write it, they make it very theological.
Yeah.
And add that note.
They do.
So I'm just wondering, how deep do we look here? And what did the writer mean as they wrote it?
Yeah.
And what they were experiencing.
I think they found this to be, the definition of God's provision, that they found the place where God took care of them, took care of all their water needs, if they would do it God's way. And so I think it's a learning experience.
I also want to know, once they found it, why would they be in a hurry to leave that?
Yeah, boy, I don't think they were. I think they're gonna miss this sweet little spot, this little oasis. So let's do one last reflection before we wrap up, and that is for me to ask you this question. We live in a culture that quickly forgets the Lord. What can we do to keep remembering that we are utterly dependent on God? What can we do to remember that we are utterly dependent on God?
Try to breathe without our body working.
Try to what without?
Try to breathe.
Breathe without your body working.
Yeah.
I hear the voice of experience in what you're saying, Fran. That you've had to depend on the Lord for breath.
Don't we all?
We do, but you've been distinctly reminded, I know.
This last 12 months of quarantine.
How has that reminded you that you're utterly dependent on God?
Because I'm here 95% of the time in these walls. And he's listening a lot to me this year, and he's talked to me sometimes too. There's nothing I can do about what's going on outside of my life. And that's on one hand freeing, on the other hand, terrifying.
Mm.
Because I have no control.
Yeah.
But God is in control. And so these last 12 months have been letting go of control.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for naming that.
I think of the positive things in my life that have happened that never would have happened without God being in my life.
Mm. That's a good way to remember, isn't it? To remember the positive things. Thank you, Ken. John, I see your hand too, brother.
And I don't know if this answers the question, but I guess when I have those moments of whining and complaining, they need to be like signals, red flags that, it's not about me. I need to turn my focus, which you see that in the Exodus story. It's like, man, these folks have seen one miracle of God after another. And then they have some moments of strong faith, then they head out, and then they start complaining again. The water's not drinkable. And then going into 16, they're going to start complaining again. And so then I guess for me, when I have those moments of, oh, woe is me, wah, wah, that's the time you got to get back to the Lord.
But what we're seeing in here, especially in the early Old Testament theology, is God gives the good and the bad.
Mm.
The same God that brings the dozen springs also put them in the desert to start with. Mm-hmm. And that's really good Jewish theology. You've got 1,000 Jewish mother jokes, and most of them, I used to have a Jewish friend who said, "You know why we have so many good Jewish mother jokes?" And I said, "No, why?" And he said, "Because God told them." But that's we are much more dualistic today, where we want to say, "Oh, the bad stuff, it comes from Satan. The good stuff, it comes from God." But in the Old Testament, especially the Pentateuch, those parts that are you'll know what I'm talking about when I say the P and the J and the E.
The different writers.
The P and the E are much more focused upon the good and the bad coming from God. The same God that gives you the garden gives you the snake.
Yeah.
That's good Old Testament theology.
Yeah.
And we don't like to go there. We don't want to say God God put me here, and yet our Old Testament has no problem with that. No problem whatsoever with that. Yeah,
it's a different way of something we're not used to. Well, thank you for this good discussion today. Next time we are looking at Exodus 16 through 18. Would anybody go ahead and volunteer to be our reader? It's just it's 3 chapters. Any volunteers? Or would anybody want to just volunteer 1 chapter? Or
I'll do 1 chapter.
Sarah, you'll do. Okay, Sarah will do 1 chapter, so maybe 16.
I'll do 16.
Okay, anybody for 17?
I'll do 17.
John, okay. And anybody for 18?
Yeah. I guess I can. Well, okay, she's got it. Good.
Linda, okay, you want to be, Jim wants to be the listener, so Jim's a designated listener. Linda will do 18. Okay, very good. While I got you quickly before you go, I'll send you the study for Lent. We're going to look at the Psalms that are assigned for the Sundays of Lent. Maybe did I send that to y'all yet? No, I don't think I did. Okay, well, we're going to look at the Psalms that are assigned for the Sundays of Lent. And I wrote, each week we will go to the Bible songbook for wisdom and inspiration as we follow Jesus to the cross. Okay, and we're finding some of those Psalms are going to, like Psalm 22, are going to, is the one Jesus quoted from the cross. But I'll get you more information on that a little closer.
I have a question. Is that what was in the newsletter?
Actually, it was in the newsletter. Thanks for that.
Okay.
It was. You got it. I did get it out just somehow, some way. Good deal. Looking forward to it. And invite others to come along. There you go. She's got it right in front. Thanks, Julia, for the notes. Good. Yeah, don't forget with Ash Wednesday, pick up your ashes. We got little baggies of ashes, and you can pick them up either in church or have them sent to you. We can mail it to you, and you just have to mix with a little bit of oil, a little bit of vegetable oil or something like that.
So we come to the church to have our ash handed to us?
Yeah. I like that one. Well, when Polly was separating out these little baggies and stuff, she said, I feel like a drug dealer. I shouldn't put that on the recording. I'm sorry.
Okay, you should back this up.
I'll back that up.
Is there going to be enough in the baggie?
Yeah, yes. For your whole family.
Multiple people?
Yes, yeah. Enough for multiple people. Only one per household because we have about 100 of them. So one per household. And then tune in for the service. I would so much like to and not like to, but I would so much want, it's so important to me to make the sign of the cross on your forehead. But we felt like this would be the safest way to include everybody right now. So
when are they going to be available, Taylor?
They're available now, I think. They'll be available the 2 Sundays before in the in-service, but there also can be sent to you. So call Polly, and she would like to, you can pick them up at the office, which you might prefer to do, or she can mail it to you, but she has to know by the 11th, I think, if you want it mailed to you. Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right. Let's go. Let's close with prayer. Thank you, God, for delivering us out of the hand of the way of the Egyptians and into your way. Thank you for providing us with your word, with all of its curiosities and all of its relevance and meaning for us. And grant us peace as we go forward into this next week ahead, and help us to prepare to receive your word about the wilderness next week. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
One.
Take
See ya.
care. Bye-bye.
Taylor?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it pouring water into the baptismal font the same way of baptizing children with living water?
The pouring is the
Jordan River, and John the Baptist using that.
Yeah.
And then Paul, when he was baptizing Lydia, used running water.
Right. The pouring.
And I thought that the pouring of the water into the font was a way of using living water. Of course, it's not.
It is.
But it was just a symbolic way. I thought. I don't know.
No,
sure.
You're exactly right. And there are fonts set up in churches where they have a pump and they pump water through all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. For that very same reason.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Y'all take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh.